This is going to be a lesson on the muscles and their functions and how they work, and many of the terms that are in relationship to these functions. So, the muscles is a very important part of the body. They do numerous things. Um, they're found right underneath the fat layer that is located underneath the epidermis, and then they cover our entire surface of our body before you get to your organelles. So it's a very unique thing. Surely you've seen illustrations with the skin removed in your textbook showing the muscular individuals, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about those different muscles and how they function. Um, this is the muscle system. So you see, these are some of the functions that the muscle does. Uh, some of them you may have already known. When we shiver, that it maintains our body temperature and maintains our inner core. It's important that homeostasis be maintained at a certain temp. And of course, you know about the fact that that muscle allows us to move because if it pivots off our bones, uh, provides form and shape to maintain a posture. Um, More than half of the body weight is muscle, which is approximately uh, 40, I think it's 40% in most mammals is muscle tissue. Um, but its weight is quite more than the, so you'd have 40% muscle tissue, but it actually weighs about half as much as we do, as everything else. There's more than 650 muscles in the body. The largest muscle in the body is the gluteus maximus. It's the main extensor muscle of the hip, um, though you may know it as the large muscle in the buttocks. It's the largest muscle in the body because its main job is to support your trunk, this here, and keeps us erect and maintain our proper posture. The gluteus maximus is the main muscle used to help you walk upstairs. You know, all the time you thought it was your legs. Well, your legs have something to do with it. The smallest muscle in the body is in your inner ear. Um, it's a tensor muscle, and it's the smallest part. It's in the ear. So it's little interesting facts. Let's go on to the next one. So here we have three types of muscles. Yeah, you know the skeletal muscle is it's the conscious muscle, voluntary. We know it's happening. We go to move it. We have to think about it. It's attached to our bones and it contains nerves that allow us movement. Um, some muscles you control, like your bicep, right? You're lifting something heavy. And other muscles, such as those that help you breathe, move without you thinking at all. So that's an interesting concept. So it's kind of nice to know that I can breathe when I'm asleep and I don't have to think about it, right? So that's nice to know. Your heart pumps and you're not thinking about it. It's got its own little stop, start, stop, start, stop, start. It's pacemakers in each in the cells that work together to make the muscle function as a smooth, one functioning cell machine. That's called your cardiac muscle. That'd be in your heart. Um, and it is the heart is the hardest working muscle in the body, and it's kind of nice to know that. But it's not considered the strongest. The strongest is your masseter, the macedon. It's in your jaw. It has a force of a great as 200 pounds on your molars, so you can put about 200 pounds of pressure on your molars when you're biting down. Smooth muscle is under uh, conscious control as well, but it's involuntary. Um, it's non-striated, smooth, spindle shaped under microscope, controlled by autonomic nervous system. A lot of smooth muscles in the intestine. It's in the linings of the intestine during peristalsis and things like that. Um, it's a very functional and very important muscle. So we go to the next one. Next one. Here's the skeletal muscles. Skeletal or involuntary muscles. Um, they're very unique. Once again, you know about the skeletal. We know when we want to move. We know when we want to talk. We know when we want to do things. And so we do. We were able to say, hey, I want to walk over there, and we go through the motions to do so. But one of the things you've got to consider is that whenever we're walking over there, we're looking over there, and we're getting our depth perception correct with our inner ears, and we're feeling the environment with our skin, and whether it's cold or hazardous or heat is being radiated. And whenever we eat, um, we our tongue manipulates the food, and we retract from distasteful food items, and we caress those that we like ice cream and things like that. Our tongue tells us that it's good, but it's a muscle, and it has sensory organs all over it, but it has to be manipulated. And we don't even think about how that happens, but it does. And let's say if we're tasting something sweet and it's bitter, well, it's bittersweet, like some of the things that they have. So you got two ranges of taste. So your tongue is I want to enjoy the sweet part. So it goes to the tip of the tongue, and then the tongue flips it back to the back of the mouth, so you can enjoy a little bit of the bitter, and you just kind of swirl it around, and your tongue's doing that. And you're not even thinking about it. You're thinking, oh, your brain is saying, I like this taste, I like that taste, and your tongue is responding. It's pretty neat. I mean, suck on a Tootsie Roll Pop one day and figure that out. Now, the eyelids, they automatically close if there's dust to protect the eyes. Um, and these kind of things are like automatic. Our skin uh, actually senses if it's in danger or if it's cold, and the capillaries of the skin and the hairs of our skin stands up and begins to tell the tissue and the muscles underneath to start vibrating, which causes heat and keeps us warm in our inner core in a cold day. And that just kind of it happens without us thinking about it. So our hair stands up, we get little bumps all over our arms, it's cold, and we're freezing. But when we actually start shivering, our muscles start shivering to generate heat. So all these things are voluntary and involuntary, but it's pretty neat the way the body protects itself. Here we're dealing with the naming of the skeletal muscles. There's a lot to understand about medical terminologies and the sources of medical terms and organs and names. But one of the things you need to know about muscles is that a lot of them have Latin origins, like rectus, R-E-C-T-U-S, R-U-C-T-U-S, is means straight, for example, and that's a Latin. And you have maximus, which means large, maximus, which you see it up there after the gluteus maximus. You have longus, which is long, and you have brevis, that's B-R-E-V-I-S, which means short. Those are some Latin terms. Anti is a Latin term too. It means against. Um, and you got AB, which is away from, ab. And then ductor, which is interesting. It means movement. It means something that moves. It's a ductor. If you can move it, then it's designed to move. You don't force it to do so. Uh, you can call that a ductor. So one of the first examples we have here is the frontalis muscle of the forehead. Well, it's right on top of the frontal lobe of the muscle. It's the name of the skull. It's the frontal skeletal structure of the skull. So it's named after where it's located. Then you have the buttocks, which the gluteus maximus. The size of the muscle influences the name. Excuse me for that. You have it's the largest. Gluteus maximus is the largest muscle, so that's where it gets its name. And then you have the gluteus minus, which is a minimal size part of the gluteus, and you have the gluteus minimus, which is the smallest. This is an example of how the pectoral muscles are including major or minor muscles in the pectoral. Some muscles have indicated their positions relative to the midline, laterus to the outside, away from the midline, and medialis toward the middle. So you have the straight, you got rectus, and you got obliques. It's at an angle, which we get into the external abdominal oblique, right? So it's external, and it's abdominal, and it's oblique muscle. It's the edge of the lower rib cage. That's the direction it flows. Um, Biceps are two-headed muscle, or of the humerus, and that's where it comes from. So location, origin. Not all muscles are named by these methods, so you got to keep that in mind. Um, but it is interesting to note how muscles can be named, and then by their attachment, by their size, by their shape, uh, the direction, location of origins that it's or its actions. So you got shape, size, fiber direction, location, number of origins, and or its actions. So those are the things to remember about naming muscles. Here we got characteristics of muscles. Contractibility. The muscles is the only one that's able to shorten due to electrical stimulants. So it's with electricity, I can make you shorten your muscles, and whenever you have excitability or inability, can respond to stimuli like it says electrical signals called action potentials. Um, Tasers work on this kind of idea. It enables and disables an individual because their muscles are contracting and they're unable to supposedly move. The extensibility, the is stretching. That's what that means. And elasticity is return to original length when relaxing. So that's when in a relaxed state. So it's these are some of the terms and characteristics of muscles. So we have a lot of muscles. There's 650 in the body. Um, and it's important that we do because most of our heat is 85% of our heat is from our muscle movements, from our how many times we contract it and relax it. Most of the times when we're cold, our muscles involuntarily contract. So that's 650 muscles are going to shiver for us to keep us warm. Uh, Muscles are attached to the bones for leverage. It allows us movement. We discussed that in the skeletal lesson, how it's important to have muscle and the skeletal work together to cause movement. Uh, this is unique. They don't muscles only pull; they never push. So that's a unique thing to understand. Attached to bones by tendon. Tendons are attached to the muscles, and ligaments are attached to other bones. So that's the difference between a tendon and a ligament. They're both connective tissue. Uh, some of the busiest bones in our muscles in our body is the ones controlling our eyes. It's important that that's probably the busiest one. Think of about over in a day, 10,000 coordinated movements to read a book. All right, so or watch TV or anything like that. So your eyes just automatically do these things in conjunction with your cortex, your brain, and it is pretty impressive to think of how many different precise movements and contractions of the pupil that are occurring due to the muscles, and 10,000, 10,000 coordinated movements to read a book. So it's pretty impressive. Muscles are attached at both ends. Duh. I mean, if they only pull, it makes sense, right? If not attached to the other end, what good is it going to do? It's just going to do that, right? Remember we're talking about how elasticity of muscles are? If you break your bone, they just, they kind of like a rubber band occurs. They contract. So it has to be attached to another point so it can pull, and that's the only thing a muscle does. It pulls, right? Attachments maybe to the bones, cartilage, ligaments, tendons, skin, or to other muscle tissue. Um, the origin and insertion origin is fixed, and insertion allows movement. So the prime mover is a single direction. Antagonist pulls in the opposite direction, right? So if I do my bicep, right, and I flex my muscle, that little tiny thing gets bigger down there. Used to be bigger than that when I was younger, trust me. So at the bottom, but underneath it, okay, uh, the muscle underneath it is not. So um, it's the tricep, right? So you got the bicep, the tricep. triceps under the underside of it, and it's relaxed. Okay, but this is tense. So when I extend it out, now my tricep is a little bulkier, a little bit more, muscular, and my bicep is relaxed and elongated. So they work together to straighten your hand out and things like that. So your bicep and your tricep. Um, so then we have synergists. They work together. They steady the movement or stabilize the joint. So it's a nice little thing to know about particular muscles. Muscles, a source of energy and heat. Now, the last thing we want to do is break down our muscles for energy. When we do that, that's a sign of severe stress that's occurring, and it will build up metabolism and lactic acid accumulates when you begin to destroy muscle tissue. It's usually because of the anatomical, which means without oxygen, um, you're using energy without oxygen, and that goes on for a while during the Krebs cycle. So adenosine triphosphate is the primary energy source uh, for energy, right? And we discussed how the body maintains homeostasis by the shivering factor. It automatically occurs without thinking about it, but it can become depleted because it can eventually become exhausted because it runs out of energy sources and oxygen to continue its shivering. Um, what is interesting about this is that the muscles do so much for us with that, and we don't think about it. Like for instance, when we shiver into the cold, that's something that occurs without us saying, "Hey, shiver! I need to stay warm." It just responds uh, to the exterior environment on its own, and we once said, like, "Hey, um, wait a minute, didn't we say that your biceps and your triceps and are controlled by thought?" Well, in this case, no. It has an automatic switch that lets these large muscles shiver and generate heat. So it's pretty neat the way things are set up to prevent you from dying. So just a moment. Muscle fatigue. It's caused by accumulation of lactic acid in the muscles, but there is extensive research that is going on now concerning the fact of potassium um, in relationship to lactic acid being built up, because what we're talking about is hydrogen ions, or the pH factor. Now, pH values in the body should be at 7.4. So what the body is trying to maintain during strenuous exercise is that pH level at 7.4. It can only slightly move before tissue damage can occur. So the occurrence of lactic acid and potassium is a fall safe to allow the muscle to continue in a fright and flight response. So whenever you have a professional athlete who gets cramps, you go, "Wow, how can that happen? They got all these physicians, they got all these doctors, they got all the medical advice you could ever think of. How could this occur?" Um, and that's exactly where this research is lying into. Uh, a lot of discussion is going on whether lactic acid in the muscle is the reason for cramping, or is it the fact that potassium is depleted. Uh, so it's an interesting thing to think about. One of the things that can cause cramping in the muscles is inadequate blood supply, narrowing of the arteries that deliver blood to your legs, atherosclerosis. These cramps usually go away soon after you stop exercising when you have those. So once you stop the strenuous event that you're doing and you have relief from cramping, you might want to look into arteriosclerosis in your extremities. Then you have nerve compression, uh, compression of nerves in your spine, lumbar stenosis, uh, slip disc in the back of your back from picking up things your whole life for hard labor. Also can produce cramp-like pain in your legs. The pain usually worsens the longer you walk. Walking in a slightly flexed position, would use when pushing a shopping cart ahead of you, may improve or delay the onset of your symptoms. And that would mean that you have a slip disc in your back, and it's causing you to pinch whenever you stand in an erect way, and you're walking. Um, Mineral depletion. Now, this is what I was talking about, potassium, right? Uh, Too little potassium, and you got calcium or magnesium is also in your diet, can contribute to leg cramps, diuretics. When you take diuretics, which causes you to expel your excess fluids, and in the hopes of lowering your blood pressure. Medicate often prescribed for high blood pressure, as it states here. It can deplete minerals from your body as you're doing so. So these minerals, and one of the top minerals is, like I said, is potassium. So one of the things that is being studied is the relationship between lactic acid and potassium. Other factors is your age. Muscle mass is certainly important. If you're losing muscle mass, uh, you can overstress your body very easily in a strenuous situation. Dehydration. Athletes are really deplorable for this. I don't know how many times you see the individuals run out on the football field with their water bottles, and just how many of those athletes drink? Not that many if you think about it. Most of them just, ignore it. Pregnancy. Muscle cramps are also common during pregnancy. This is the estrogen and the hormonal levels. And once again, this moves in and out of various minerals, calcium, magnesium, potassium from the muscles. And this all affects the fact whether they can get oxygen to the muscle uh, during contractions. So you have medical conditions. You might be at a higher risk of muscle cramps if you have diabetes, uh, liver or thyroid problems. So all these things are true to understand. And it's important to understand that research is still continuing on, and we're always learning new things in the biomedical field. So it's an interesting subject area that's occurring, and I've had a fascination with the fact of, well, they're breathing so hard, oxygen's certainly getting into the blood. What could be the problem? So there is the thing. There is understanding how the oxygen supply is blocked to the muscle tissue. So uh, we're going to the next slide. In this particular slide, we're going to talk about muscle tone. Um, Maintains body posture, as you know. Proper nutrition and regular exercise maintains the tone of our muscles. Now, the first word we have is isotonic. It gives you a clue right off the back. It's got tonic as in, and it means the tone of your muscles, and how we relate to that. Now, there are actually two parts to isotonic contractions. One is eccentric, eccentrac, eccentric motion, and the other one is a concentric, concentric, concentric motion. Now, concentric is you do your biceps like this. You just hang it out here, and I contract it, and it gets smaller and it masses up. That's a concentric motion. But when I relax it, that's the eccentric. And you can feel the muscle just relax, and that is the eccentric. So that pretty much explains the isotonic contraction. We do that in the gym. We do it when we walk, when we talk. We use it all the time. Now, another one is isometric contraction. Now, I'm going to illustrate to you what that means. Isometric contraction. I take this and I'm holding a cup of coffee, okay, and try to get it in the video here as much as I can. There we go. Put it. Whoop, where is it? There we go. I got this cup of coffee in my hand, okay. Now my elbow's bent, my hand's up, and I'm holding the coffee. It has a certain weight and volume. You may say, well, nothing's moving. Well, I take this water and I pour it into the cup, which was empty, and I ask you, is my muscles working in my arm that's holding the cup, the full water? And the answer is yes, of course it is. Well, it didn't move. I didn't change position. And so, but yet we know that the muscles is holding the cup of coffee steady, although I didn't move or do anything with the extension of my arm and at the elbow or anything. So that's an isometric contraction. It responds to the load, to the workload required to stay in its position that you're at. So it's important to understand the differences between the two. Atrophy is a shrinking or lack of use of the muscles. You don't use it, you lose it. And hypertrophy is muscle enlargement with the weight lifting and things like that. That's when you get very muscular. So this should conclude this lesson on the muscles. And I'll have one more slide for you. I'd like to always leave my students with some reference materials. One of them is on your blackboard. You have a prompt that says faculty availability. If you click on that prompt, you'll get information on how to contact your primary professor, and that way you can make arrangements to get individual tutoring or ask questions directly, and they can respond accordingly to the directions provided. Another one that you should be aware of is there is a book online, your textbook, for example, and you go to your digital reading prompt, and you can go right to your textbook, and your textbook has a search prompt in it, and you put any words you want, and you can search the whole book for any particular item that you desire. You could practice using that, and it's got a lot of things, and it's got a glossary, dictionary, numerous things right there in the subunit of your search engine that searches through your book. Then we have the UMA library. That's a very tried and true place. I mean, who wouldn't want to go to the library? The library has textbooks, videos, lessons on numerous subject matter, journals, photographs, charts, diagrams. It's a library. It's everything you would expect from a library. So it's one of the best resources you could use, and I would highly recommend that you do so. It was a great great to be able to do this lesson for you concerning the muscle system. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'm wishing you the best.